Because isn't prayer being with God in some way? Isn't prayer consciousness trying to influence consciousness? And in the stillness, there is nothing to be said, nothing to do, nowhere to go. If you learn stillness, you are resting in that awareness. And when you rest in that awareness, you are in deep prayer. This is what they call a non-dual state, not two. And when you don't have two, you can't say you have one, because there is no contrast. That would be dualistic. So in the non-dual state, you're resting in prayer as being. And as being, you are one with the one being, the one presence. Good morning. I'd like to start with a story which only makes me look like an idiot, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And when I was about 25 years old, I borrowed a kayak from a friend of mine in Flagstaff, Arizona, and caught a ride with some people up to Utah southern border, and got on a river called the Dolores River, which is about a 200-mile river before it joins the Colorado River, and then ends. The trip I was going to do ended up in Moab. Having done this solo kayak trip, I got out of the water and picked up the kayak and started hitchhiking back to Flagstaff. That's where the humor begins. And 8 hours later, I had made it into town further, which was no big feat. I probably could have walked it 2 or 3 times in 8 hours. The only person that took any interest in me was a woman who had a Jeep and kept coming by and said, "Are you ready to sell the kayak?" And then about in the 8th hour, a car comes by and they say they're going south. I think they're going to Monticello, which is the next city. And what they have said they were going to, I guess, was this turnoff just before that. It's only a truck stop there, and the road has a T and it goes off to the west. When that happens, actually it was in Colorado, and so at the border between Colorado and Utah, there's a station that you have to pass, and this is the road to that. Well, I'm there another hour or so, and every truck that might be able to help me is speeding up as it goes downhill, passes me, and then goes on up the hill, having gotten momentum. So I'm standing on the side of the road feeling very foolish, but I did have something up my sleeve. I said, "God, get me out of here." And with that, I left the kayak on the side of the road, walked across the street, and took something out of my $20 I had in my pocket and bought a hamburger. When I came back, the kayak was gone. The kayak was gone. It wasn't my kayak. My clothes were thrown out. The food, little bit of food I had, was also gone. I go back and I ask, "Did anybody see him? Somebody pick up a kayak?" And the guy said, "Yeah, I did. I thought it was you that was getting in the truck." So I call the sheriff. And about 10 minutes later, he says, "Would you be willing to press charges?" Calls me back on that payphone, says, "Would you be willing to press charges?" And I say, "Yes, I would." Well, it turns out that one of those trucks that would have been coming downhill was actually going to turn left. It slowed down enough to see the kayak there and thought, "Hey, empty kayak, nobody maintaining it." They put it on top of a flatbed truck, which was on top of a flatbed truck. So when they got to the border and I told them what the kayak looked like, here they were with a flatbed truck on it, with a kayak on it. They nailed those guys. The cops came and got me at 120 miles an hour, took me down to Monticello, said, "Is this your kayak?" They did kangaroo justice with these guys, demanded $200 to go to jail. They told me, though, I could take a shower in the jail, and I could sleep on the courthouse lawn. And in the morning, they put me on the mail truck, and the mail truck took me 150 miles through the Navajo Nation and ended up at this place, which was a very large trading post called Cameron. I got out of the car, And 20 feet away was a river company, which y'all probably know. I used to be a river guide on the Great Canyon. They had a 13-passenger van with only 12 seats filled. So I jumped in there. They took me right back to Flagstaff to the guy who had given me the boat. The boat stayed there, and 2 weeks later I came back and picked it up when I had a truck. Well, that's my prayer story. And it illustrates a few things, that when you ask for help, you don't get to say exactly, not everything's going to go your way, and although it's going your way. Have you noticed? It's like, wow, I lost a kayak that wasn't even mine. I was stuck in the middle of nowhere. Well, it turned out everything worked out beautifully. As an experiment, you might want to try that. That's a way of praying. From a small being to a grand being, saying your prayer and request of what you would like to see happen. Obviously it works. Obviously it has been in practice for as long as human beings have been doing prayer, which is a very long time. But when you pray from that place, I believe you are how should I say this? You're not expanding the deepest, most refined way of saying prayer. I guess you would say that. Because everybody in a foxhole prays. But there are ways of being and praying that don't take you into the foxhole so often. Now, everybody is in a foxhole once in a while. And that's just the way life is. But what I would like to talk to you about is something that Unity's been saying for a long time, which is essentially this, that there is only one presence and one power. There is only God. And now I want to change it from one presence, one power, because that takes too long to say. There is only God. And when you say there is only God, that means there is only God. And everything you see, everything you have ever been, everything that is going to be in this universe, including the universe itself, is a manifestation of the one God. And so all that is, despite its appearances, is just one. And you may have a hard time understanding that because our language, all our language that humanity has been using for as long as I think we've been talking, has a dual way of expressing things. Hot, cold, high, low, left, right, you, me, God, me. Two separate things, at least, to describe something. There's always an implied other in every part of the speech. So when we use speech to describe what I'm talking about, we are essentially being inaccurate. There's an old Sufi saying that if you want to ask me about God, the best thing I can do is be silent. Because if I say anything, it's at least partially a lie. But they also say, if I don't say anything, I'm a coward. And so I don't want to be a coward, but you're going to recognize that my voice will not be able to say the words, but perhaps if we actually explore our internal experience, you will know what I'm talking about. Let's talk about the definitions we have of God. What do you know about, what have you been told about God, I guess just to say. Well, the first thing I think is that everybody says God is everywhere. And God is infinite. And you might, if you've been thinking about it, God is consciousness. God is aware. And beyond that, we have all this flowery language. God is love, God is, but let's just be really simple in this conversation. Now ask yourself, if you can do this, it's going to be really tricky and fun. Can you see me? Are you aware you can see me? Now turn your attention to the seer, the one that's seeing, the witness. And if you'll do it right now, I believe what you'll find is that your vision will widen. It won't be so tightly focused. Your sense of well-being might increase slightly, but more importantly, you'll get a sense that there is a presence that is you, that is the witness of everything. And as you sink down into that presence, what you'll find is that it doesn't have time. It's outside of time. The time really belongs to the egoic mind, to the finite mind that most of us operate in. And you'll also see that if you keep looking, please keep looking, if you find it, you'll find that it doesn't have any dimensions. It is void of dimension. And so when you try to figure out where its limits are, you see that you can't find the limits either. So it's outside of time. You don't know the limits of it. It's still as can be. And the space, or the spacious aspect of it, is big enough to contain anything you have in the outer experience. And it is aware, and it is the real you. So that's who you are at depth, not the surface, but this, as Michael said, you are a soul having this experience. You're that. Now compare your experience. Is that your experience? You can't claim, you can't say what are the limits of your awareness. Can you? And has not your consciousness been able to be the witness of everything that has happened in you, and is still the same witness it was when you were a child? And so this presence that you are, this presence, has almost identical qualities that we just said about God. It is conscious. It is aware. And it doesn't have limits. Now let's apply a little logic. How many infinites can you put in one space? One. The infinite that God is shows up as the infinite of your awareness as you. So when they say there is only one presence, one power, as a presence in you, there is that presence alive as you. It is the presence that was there at your birth and will be there at your death. But it has no time. It just has awareness. And the space for anything that happens. Now, if you sit in that space of awareness as you are communing with the one presence, one power. You're communing with God not as a separate being, but as the being of God as you. This is not what we've been told. You must bow down to God. God is great. You are nothing. Well, it turns out that's not true. That God is great, and it's great as you. And so when you're in a state of this awareness, you're in a very high state of prayer. Because isn't prayer being with God in some way? Isn't prayer consciousness trying to influence consciousness? And in the stillness, there is nothing to be said, nothing to do, nowhere to go. If you learn stillness, you are resting in that awareness. And when you rest in that awareness, you are in deep prayer. This is what they call a non-dual state, not two. And when you don't have two, you can't say you have one, because there is no contrast. That would be dualistic. So in the non-dual state, you're resting in prayer as being. And as being, you are one with the one being, the one presence. So now this makes a very interesting thing. In poetic language, as I said, this is going to sound somewhat dualistic, but in poetic language it goes like this. Existence, which means, let me talk about existence. There is being, and to exist comes out of the Latin ex sistere, to stand apart. So existence is trying to stand apart from the one presence being. So when I read this, you might want to keep that particular way of defining existence. Existence is being the baseline, in motion. Being as existence in rest, or I might say stillness. Prior to the emergence of things, being is manifest. It is empty, formless, transparent, silent, still. Form is emptiness in motion. Emptiness is form in rest. Praise is prayer in movement. Prayer is praise at rest. When we are still, we come closest to God. Be still and know that I am God. Psalm 46. Meister Eckhart. Nothing in all creation is so godlike as stillness. The problem with me doing this with you in this setting with so little time is that exploration, which is the real meat of where I'm hoping you go. This exploration may unfold for you in its own time. And since we only gave a few moments to this exploration, you may not have had that experience. But let me give you a technique for doing that on your own. So you know that Moses had the burning bush, and the bush said, I am. And if you were asked, who are you? As you go into that question, you would say, I. And if you're having an experience, I would ask you, who's having that experience? And you would say, I am. And then go deeper and deeper into yourself until that breaks apart from your outer activity, that finite mind you thought you were at some point, that body that you thought was you, and drop you into the presence of being. And since that sounds a bit tricky, I think you could just start by trying to be very still. And then in that still pond, ask the question, who is aware at this moment? And follow that to the deeper truer aspect of who you are. And when you are there, when you be still, you may know I am is God. So that's the plan. To not be separate when you pray, but to let prayer time be a time when you move into stillness instead of words, into being rather than asking, into awareness rather than rote. Be still and know I am God. So when we come here for the World Day of Prayer, you may read the prayer request and you may think, oh, I've got to really ask God in a very powerful way. And you may, because God knows I've done that. And we will always do it because there's no really wrong way to pray. But I'm asking you to consider also spending some time, at least, in the absolute stillness of your being, sinking in until it's quiet, and then asking, who is aware at this moment? And follow that thread until you know. Let us pray. Let's sit as still as possible. And let us be as quiet as possible. Quieter. Deeper. Now turn your attention to the one that is already and always has been aware. And go deeper. And so it is. Amen. I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.